Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's edition of the Daily Standup. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Recently I was contacted by one of my team members, and they were concerned because they said that they felt like sometimes their agile coaching journey was getting stale, that they were looking for the same things over and over again, or that many organizations were struggling with the same problem. So the question came up, how can we regain focus on our agile journey? So I did a little research and I found an article on the Agile Alliance website about tips to keep focused on your agile journey, but I wanted it to be more from a coaching perspective. So I tore into this article a little bit, and over the next couple of days, I want to review some of the tips that they've given in here to help your organization from a coaching perspective, but to help you as a coach grow as well. So, some of the things that you should be looking for beyond the 12-step program that I gave to you. Now, some of these may tie in a little bit with the 12-step program, but my goal is to give you to strengthen the 12-step program, to give you an addendum, to give you some additional things that you can work on. So that way you can kind of see where you are in your agile journey for your organization. So what I thought I would do is I'd break it down and I'll give you 3 to 5 tips a day over the next couple of days. So that way it's something that you can grab onto, something you can embrace, and something that's going to help you along your agile journey. So let's start with have your scrum roles clearly defined. Now, this is in the 12-step program. But I think what most people don't realize is a lot of organizations are coming in and saying, well, I don't build software, so I don't specifically have developers, or I have a different type of tester, or we're doing mostly research, or we're a company that builds telecommunication. We don't have specific products or services outside of the things that we're building internally to build a telecommunications network. I've heard a lot recently from many different companies, especially in the healthcare space. We get countless number of people working on COVID-19 vaccine or other things like that, where there's a lot of research and testing and things that are happening that don't necessarily align with a single role. So one of the trends that I'm starting to see is that in places where technology does exist, that there's starting to be a real blur between a software developer and a tester. No longer are those roles mutually exclusive. What we're seeing is that they're starting to brown, they're starting to blend together, and that's a good thing, right? But I think the other thing that I'm seeing that's more concerning is that clearly defined scrum masters and product owners are starting to become less and less available. And what's happening is people don't necessarily understand all the responsibilities of a scrum master. So they're piling on more responsibilities or asking a scrum master to do a second job. And they're not taking full advantage of having someone with the skill set of a scrum master to do more than just facilitate meetings. So I think part of it is education, which is probably the most important piece, that people really need to get their head around what these roles do. So for you as a coach, it's important for you to make sure that the product owner knows what their responsibilities are, that they don't lack the power to make change, that they understand the importance of the backlog, that they understand the importance and honor WIP limits, that they're respectful to the team, and that they have courage and that they have the ability to say no, right? But I think that if you put together a role agreement worksheet or make this part of your team working agreement, I think this is something that'll really help you along the way and something that a lot of organizations are certainly struggling with. So that's our first tip. Second tip, be aware of add-ons that increase complexity and mask deficiencies in your system. Okay, so this one's definitely leaning technical, right? Anytime you're doing things to, oh, it's just a small modification or it's just something extra for this. Or, I think the worst one is when you're so far in debt that a leader comes in and says, well, we need to stand up a specific bug fix team. One of the things that I see is that with this whole trend of scaling, so you hear people talking about scaled agile, whether it's safe or whether it's disciplined agile, or I don't care which method you use, choose Scrum at scale, choose your method, right? Less. What we're finding is that people as they scale are thinking, I'm going to build more, and by building more I'm going to be successful, when in actuality the companies that are most successful, the Teslas, the SpaceX, the Amazon, the Walmart, the Apple, what they're doing is they're scaling back. So yeah, it seems like they're building more things, but what they're doing is they're scaling back the number of things in motion for any given team, and they're allowing teams to swarm to limited work in progress to get things done. So I think that when you start adding complexity and start just doing one-offs for people and start, branching out that way, that is a symptom and it shows that you're going to have a much bigger problem long term. So it's something you definitely have to be mindful of. If you start seeing those kind of things happen, just count on that increase in complexity and count on not being able to get a whole lot done. Tip number three, be clear about what behavior you expect, but also about the behavior you do not want to see anymore. Now, this is probably one of my favorite ones. And this is one that I don't talk about in the 12 steps. This is crucial conversations. This is having those difficult conversations with even more difficult people. Sometimes there's just bad behavior that's embedded in a team, especially from a coaching perspective. More times than not, when I go into an organization, I spend a far majority of my time helping teams unlearn bad behavior before we set them up for progress with their new behavior. So I think that this one's incredibly important. I think that once you understand what types of things the team are doing or the teams are doing and why they're doing it, and what types of things people in the organization are doing, you need a straightforward explanation about why things are going to happen this way or why things are transpiring this way so that you can establish whether it's something that makes sense and it's just part of their agile culture and part of their journey, or whether it's something that needs to be corrected. But there's nothing wrong with you as a coach coming in and saying, these are my expectations. What are your expectations of me? Setting some ground rules, making it part of an agreement, and making sure you clearly understand what's happening. That way, you have collective ownership and collective responsibility when it comes to getting things done. Tip number four is let the team decide what and how they want to improve. Now, this one's interesting. I do wholeheartedly believe that if you let the team decide what they want to improve, that they're going to be fully invested and that they'll come up with innovative ideas to correct the problem. However, I want to be clear. Sometimes the team doesn't know what they want to improve, or a lot of times what I found is that as part of an immature team, teams want to correct the wrong things. And when I say the wrong things, it doesn't necessarily mean out of order. It just means some things that maybe aren't as urgent to correct as other things. So I think that it is important to let the team decide, but I also think it's important as a coach to give them the guidance that they need. It's not all about trying to crank out the most points. We want to focus on outcome over output. We want to make sure that the team understands that when we're talking to them about improvement, that we're talking to them more about communication, maturity, helping them be successful, anything that helps make them feel like their opinion is valued and that their improvement is important is probably the right path. But we want to make sure that we're not just letting them decide on things that could be detrimental to the success of the rest of the organization. And finally, for today, number five, be aware that the challenges you'll need to pay attention to will shift over time. Now, this is super cool. And this does tie into to step 12 of the 12 step program. Once you get to the right point, know that your focus is going to shift because there's going to be something else that you need to pay attention to when this over here, when one end of the seesaw falls, the other end goes up, right? So it's just a matter of you trying to figure out, because the truth is trying to find perfect balance across the entire organization is not only challenging, but in many cases, dang near impossible. Now, I've worked with many organizations where they've put together plans to say, we're going to take an organizational approach to how we're going to do things, and they try to leverage and get things flatlined. But what I can tell you is, even with those approaches, you're still going to see ebb and flow. You're still going to see some shifting. So just be aware that with those shifts, that you're going to have to pivot and adjust too. It's all part of the empirical process. So I hope that these tips made you a stronger coach, and I hope that you've gotten something that you could take away that you could apply within your teams. And if you have any ideas of ways these things can be applied or different ideas, feel free to reach out to us at learnmore@agiledad.com, where we'd love to learn about your tips. And as always, we have tips here, but we also have a lot of additional information on the AgileDad website. Feel free to visit agiledad.com. We'd love to have you there. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile. Until tomorrow for your next set of tips, do take care. We'll